Welcome to my veneer nightmare. This is Zeke. I'm your host with Odd Job Fix, and we're going to fix a hammered dulcimer. A hammered dulcimer is an instrument from the Middle Ages as well as the harpsichord. However, this one probably dates to about the Civil War period. It's rosewood. It has a pine soundboard. It's got two bridges. They're played with those little wands or hammers, as you see there. They have kind of an unusual tone, but this instrument is pretty much roached out. I don't think it'll ever be a viable instrument again. It was assembled first, then the veneer was applied, so those cracks are pretty lethal. Now, the reason I'm doing this is just to do it. Just to show that I can do it, just to show that you can do it. There's some moldings missing there. Whether I replicate those or not, that's still up in the air. I doubt if I will. It's got some bird's eye maple on the interior there. There's a shot of the sound hole in the pine soundboard. And another shot of the pegs. It's fully strung. It's very loose. It doesn't play. Now there's a crack in the lid of the thing, which is separating. So the first thing I'm going to do is what I usually do. I'm going to clean it with some orange oil that's got a little pumice in it. It's one of my favorite cleaners. And I think you're going to see when I wipe this off that it's pretty grungy. I really don't want to mess around with this thing if the top isn't going to look good. If I can make the top look decent, then I'll go ahead and attempt the veneer repair. But I'm going to start with the top. Look at that. I mean, this thing is just really grimy. So I'll wipe it off and continue to clean and see what we come up with. Now, speaking of hammered, this thing is pretty hammered. It's a mess, and I've spotted a few little specks of paint, so I wanted to show my trick for removing specks of paint. That's a small little palette knife. It's got a pretty sharp edge, kind of squared off, and I just lightly push against the paint. So I'm going to test it now with a little alcohol. I'm going to test on the back side below the hinge and see how the finish reacts, because it's probably going to be shellac, but I detected another finish on it, and as you're going to see in a little bit, that second finish is going to give me problems. As a matter of fact, in some places, the alcohol lifted the area when I did it on the top. So I'm taking a Scotch-Brite pad here, or perhaps that's a piece of sandpaper. I forget, actually. I think it's a Scotch-Brite. And now just wiping it with some water to see what it's going to look like if that finish did blend at all. I'm just going to keep trying. If I can't do the top, then I'm not doing it. That's the story here. Now, what I'm hoping to get here is more or less an even surface, even if it's dull. I'm going to go ahead and use some turpentine at this point. That will lift out any leftover oils that didn't get picked up by the orange oil. And it also tells me where all the defects are and what it's going to look like if it's really buffed out. And then, as you can see, this hammered dulcimer is pretty hammered. But let's see how much dirt this swab picks up. Well, we got a little bit. So I'm going to wipe this off and then let it dry for a few minutes. Now what I'm doing here is I'm actually going to use some sandpaper. This is a 400 wet or dry. I've got it on a soft sponge pad, and I'm using the turpentine instead of water for my sanding liquid. So what I hope to do here is sort of blend in some of that old finish and the original finish. And I think this is representative of what I'm going to get. Just there to the left, you could see, and in the center there where it's a little duller, I think those are remnants of the old finish. But I'm not going to strip it, and I can't strip it. It's not worth that much effort. I really want to just get into this veneer repair. That's what this is all about. So the last step on the top is to clean it with some window cleaner. Yes, it's okay to clean finishes with window cleaner. It shouldn't have any silicones in it if you know of, but you can do this on lacquer, varnish, shellac, polyurethane. It won't hurt it as long as the finish is intact. You don't need to necessarily moisten the wood, but you're still cleaning it. And I'm still getting dirt. So I'm going to wrap up this on business on the top here, and I think that's what it's going to be like. Get ready to put a little wax on it just to check it out. I'm using a dark colored wax. Now wax, as you know, is a blend of beeswax and oils and carnauba. The more carnauba it has, the more expensive it is, and the harder it'll be, and the higher the shine you'll get. So you don't always want a lot of carnauba wax. Great for cars, not so much for furniture. But there will be some in there so that you can actually build up coats of wax. So with 4/0 steel wool, what some people call 4/0 steel wool, I rub the wax in circular, and then most of the time I'll finish it off with long, even strokes going with the grain. Kind of difficult to do with rosewood veneer, especially when it's been book matched as it has been in quadrants. Yeah, there's 4 sections on the top here. So we'll give this a quick buff. You can do this a couple times in 24 hours, and then you really need to let it set and harden up for a period of time if you're going to get a good buildup. Otherwise, it's just wax on, wax off. Okay, time for the veneer. This is the nightmare. I don't know what was used originally to put this stuff on, but I didn't find this to be your ordinary hide glue. Also, I realized that the veneer ran down underneath the molding. So after playing around with this a little bit and realizing that it is underneath the molding and having removed the end piece there, I'm going to show you a little bit about the technique of walking the molding off. Those are square nails that help date the piece. And if you know anything about square nails, they really hold. It's been glued as well, but those square nails have a ton of holding power. So we'll start by seeing if we can break the top edge and separate this without destroying the molding. I'm going to use as wide a chisel as I have. It's pretty sharp. Now I'm going to take my 5-in-1 painter's tool and see if I can slip it in the end there after I've slightly broken the top edge and move this molding away. The idea is to walk this molding down or run it down from one end to the other, gently prying right to left, left to right, doesn't matter, and begin to lift it off as you see there, walking the tools one after another. Now I'm going to speed up the video just a little bit here because I probably spent about 20 minutes on doing this, but just gentle pressure as I go. If there's a flaw in the molding, you're going to snap it right there at the flaw. So it's good to study the molding and be very patient. So it's worth it. So now onto the veneer. I'm going to try heat first. When you use heat, all you need to do is get to about 200 degrees and it should melt the glue below and not do too much damage. I was hoping to even salvage some of this rosewood, but it was not to be. I ended up scorching the rosewood and I made it brittle. So this clearly is just not going to work. I mean, I didn't get my thermostat or my thermometer, my infrared thermometer out, but I was probably 300 degrees. Wood burns at 500 degrees. So the next step was wet, heat, steam. I've got a little vinegar on a terry towel, and I've got the iron set to medium hot. And I leave it on there for, a good minute. And you can see that that's going to work a lot better. So that's the go-to method for this one. And again, with the vinegar and all the heat, there's not much salvaging of this wood. I have no idea what the glue was. That's what's left. And getting on to the veneer part now that I'm going to repair, I cut myself a window that sort of matches what I'm replacing. And so I'm going to lay the window over this veneer that I received. Let's take this out. I think I got 6 pieces for a very reasonable price. It's not real Brazilian rosewood, but It's as close as you're going to get. And most rosewood comes in very narrow strips. This is about 8 or 9 inches wide. I need 9.5 to fill that gap, and so I'm going to have to cut this on the bias and then book match it to make it look somewhat like the original. So using a paper cutter just to rough it out, a little bit oversized, and then we'll see if we can't book this together and make a reasonable facsimile of what it looked like. There it is. That's my finished pattern. So I'll move this over to the case of the instrument and begin to glue it down. Now, as I said, I need 9.5-inch wide pieces out of that 19 inches overall. So I'll mark the center line at 9.5 and then go ahead and draw a line, which will be where I do my bookmark. I'll double back just to check my measurement, and it's equal. So go ahead and draw the line here in the middle of that span. And we'll go ahead and bring the pieces over here to the case and get a length measurement on each of those. I'm going to cut those a little differently, as you're going to see. But the first thing I need to do is find that length, that 9.5. If there's any angle there, I'm going to discover it now, because there's just about one chance to get this right. So I'm going to use a veneer cutting saw to do this. And I'm going to angle the saw just a little bit inward. In other words, I'm putting a slight undercut on my pieces. So when they come together, the top edges meet before the bottom edges do. You can see the bias I'm putting on that right there. Oh, maybe not quite 10 degrees. So there's one piece. We'll see how it mates up to its partner there. Wait, don't get confused. That doesn't go like that. There you go. That's a little better. Now I've got a split there, I can see. And I've got some tape on the split on there, which will be removed before it's glued down. Any tape that's going to be there needs to be on the top, not between the veneer and the base. So that's my matchup. And I think that's going to work out pretty good. So, made up some hide glue here. It's been heated. It's about 140 degrees, which is the proper temperature for using hide glue. I'm going to use a spreader here to kind of spread this out, being very careful to make sure I get the edges coated. It's starting to tack up just a little bit on me here. You don't have a lot of open time with this stuff. I think you can see it pulling. So I better giddy up. Get some up here. And again, it's very important that I get all the way to the edges, but I don't need to make a mess and dribble all over the edges there. It will wipe off with water, but got enough to do without having to clean up a whole bunch of dribbles. So we'll slip this into place. And remember which way it goes. I've got that blue tape there to remind me where I want the top edge of this in order to maximize my book match. And I've got a little other witness piece of tape there that's right by the roller there that transfers over to the other piece so that they line up the way that I intended them. So after rolling out the air bubbles, I'm using a 6-inch wide putty knife. Some people swear that this is all you need to do. If you get all of the air out and get it down flat and you've got good mating surfaces, that the vacuum between the two pieces is all that's needed. You can just walk away from that. I don't think that the substrate is quite that good. I do feel that I got all the air out, but nevertheless, I'm going to put some wax paper on the top, and I've cut a caul that I'm going to clamp down with moderate pressure and leave this overnight. This board's been checked for straight, and it'll have a nice even pressure. Could have been just a little bit wider, but that's what I had. and there's my clamp up. So we'll take it apart in the morning. Well, 24 hours has passed, and I've taken off the clamps, and this is what we have. I'm going to clamp this board down. I'm going to leave it a little bit overhang here to give some backing, and I'm going to use my veneer saw, and I'm just going to run it along the bottom of the chest, the case here, and just slice this off. So here's my clamp up for the saw cut, just leaving it overhang just a little bit and cutting against the backside, the underside of that board. And you just saw that piece of veneer drop off, and it made for a pretty good cut. So now here's a problem. I'm not going to take the strings out of this instrument, and I'm not going to remove the bridges, so I can't really cut with the veneer saw. So I'm going to use a straight edge and a backer. I am going to use the veneer saw, but I just can't use it as it was intended, or as I planned, as I did from the underside. I'm going to do this from the front side and cut against that board. Now this is how that works. Just a little even pressure, make sure it rides right on the straight edge. That straight edge has got to be right on the money. And when this cuts off, there'll be very, very little left to trim. There goes the first piece. You'll know when you get through. Okay. I lowered that down just to show the edge that I cut there. There's a little repair that needs to be done afterwards. And hopefully I've got a high edge there that the little triangle will fit inside. Now I have a low angle block plane here, which is a miserable little plane that I didn't pay anything for. The front shoe's been welded, but the rest of the thing works pretty well. The idea is to go with the grain. In other words, the grain's going uphill and I'm going with the grain, and then I'll turn around and come the other way on the right hand side to the center. I hope to take this down right to the finish and not cut into the finish, although a little bit of damage can be expected, and touch up is the name of the game, of course. But this does a pretty good job, and won't have to use too much sandpaper, if any at all. Actually, I had forgotten that I had intended to use a file, and while I was editing this video, I saw the clip using the file. So that's a really good technique to control the final cut, to get right down there to just touching the original finish and no more. I seem to be okay with going against the grain there, but I don't know if that's a good idea. While off camera, I sanded this pretty well. 180, 220, and I actually went to 320. Had to do a little work there around the keyhole. So I'm going to put some dye stain on that. Let me set the camera down and I'll get the stain out. All right, one thing that you want to be sure to do before staining is to use a tack rag. You can wipe it off with a rag, a towel, you can do anything you want. Brush it, blow it with air. That tack rag is still going to pull more debris out of the pores of the wood. So this is strictly a dye stain, hence the glove. I'm just going to use a cotton ball here. This stuff dries very quickly, and you can get lap joints in the stain like you see there very easily. You've got to keep a wet edge. I think I'm going to work my way back to the top to re-wet everything and make sure that I'm getting enough color. If you do this again after it dries, it will darken it a little bit, but dye stain tends to pick itself up, so the best way to do it is to get as close as you can, and then if you've got to tone it, you've got to tone it. So, which I did end up putting a little toner on top of this after it was done. This is my last pass. I'm done with it, and it's not quite red enough. Tom Johnson of Thomas Johnson Antique Restoration in Maine advises do not let your stain get too red. You're not going to get it back. And I follow his advice. I'll leave a link to his videos down in my description box. Well worth watching. You saw that triangular piece that I needed to repair on the top front lip, and here's another one that needs to be done. So the way I do it is I get a piece of tracing paper, which is as thin as I can find. I line the factory corner to the corner of the piece as close as I can to the top, and then very lightly trace out this little chip, and there it starts to reveal itself. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use this on the back side of the rosewood. I can leave this under the veneer because it's so thin it will just absorb the glue. I can put tape on top, but if I'd used tape as the tracing pattern on the back side, I would have had to remove it. And this is a pretty small piece. It's fragile enough without manipulating it. So I'm going to just do a quick little touch up here with the scissors and then go ahead and transfer that to a piece of rosewood. Here's a little trick, again a Thomas Johnson trick. Put a little flap of tape there that'll hold it, and then you can tip it back so that you can put your glue on, get both surfaces at the same time, and then move your clamp into place, which is what I'm going to do right now. This piece wouldn't take a 3-foot clamp, so that's a 5-foot pipe clamp sitting on top, and that's why the towel is there, because it's a big, long, heavy clamp, and I didn't need to put any pressure, any more marks onto the case. So we're just going to squeeze that down nice and tight there. I've got a piece of packing tape between the wood and the glue surface, which will peel off real quick. There's those square nails that I had to remove one by one from the piece. So I'm just setting one right here, and this is what I came up with as a finished piece. Several coats of wax, moldings cleaned up. I didn't make any new moldings, as I said I probably wouldn't. And there on the right hand lower side, you can see the new replacement work. Blends in pretty well. And that's a wrap, folks. Thank you very much for watching. I have no idea what's going to happen to this thing. It might make a nice little desk or a table for somebody, but I'm not going to be the one that tears it apart and renders it completely useless. Maybe somebody will restore it down the line somewhere. We don't know.